Hey guys, got a good lesson in tactics now. This will be relevant to everybody at the beginner improving level. This is an unrated 10-minute game against a player rated 12-18 roughly. It was 12-18. Okay, so they start with e4 and I play the French defense. Knight 2, f3, d5, takes. So we have a version of the advance. And now d4, grabbing the center, and c5, all very, very standard French stuff. c3, so that if I capture on here, white can capture with another wing pawn. Knight to f6, defends my pawn again, pin, break the pin, and knight to d2. I now bring up my bishop pinning white's knight, and we have a bishop kick, bishop retreats, inviting g4, which would really weaken this kingside area. The queenside's already been weakened to an extent with 2 pawn moves, but we don't go for that. Instead, white throws out his other bishop with check, so it's a forcing move, and preparing to castle maybe kingside. I block with my knight, and white castles kingside. So now this knight isn't really pinned, but this knight is in an absolute pin. I castle, getting out of the pin, and white decides to capture in this case. Possibly not a great move. Trading off his good bishop. Look, he's got a bit of a dark square pawn chain here, which means that this dark squared bishop is going to have less mobility around the board than the light squared bishop did. And also it's given me an extra c-pawn as well. And now we have knight to b3, and here I decide to defend my pawn. It's already defended by the bishop, but I defend it again with the knight, moving the knight in towards my opponent's territory. And we have an exchange of bishops now. So this pawn is still attacked twice by pawn and knight, and defended twice by knight and queen. This knight, remember, is still pinned on the queen. Knight retreats, and we trade off knights. Okay, so material is completely equal at this point. Now, one thing you will notice, this is a case of an overworked defender. So if you were going to do the goldfish at this point, you'd say rook's defending that, queen's defending that, rook's defending that, that's defended. Queen is also defending this knight here. No one's defending this pawn, those pawns are defending each other. Now, the key thing about all of this is not so much the undefended pawn, but it's the fact that this queen is defending knight and knight. This knight is also defended by a pawn. So what that means is that right now, if this knight's also defending this pawn. So this knight's defended 3 times currently, but when I take out the knight, the only piece that can recapture is the queen. So now the knight that was on here is gone, no longer defending that, and the queen that was on here is no longer defending that. So now the only defender of this knight is this pawn. So I go ahead, capture the pawn, and the only way to recapture now is with the g pawn, and now we have doubled isolated pawns on the f file, and we have an isolated pawn on the h file. Okay, let's just run over that again, little tactic. Knight comes back here. This knight is currently defended once, twice, 3 times, but this capture removes 2 of the 3 defenders because the queen's now moved away from the defense of the knight, and now my bishop can capture. So I just push my queen forward here, now attacking this pawn, and the king moves to defend. Queen to d6 with check, and blocks with the pawn. Centralize the rook, centralize the rook. So here, a very common scenario with rooks looking at each other down an open file. Now generally, you don't really want to be the one who initiates the exchange when you've both got a connected rook to defend. But again, look, this pawn here is defended only by the queen, all right? And that may prove to be significant. Now, white now makes a move to double up his rooks, and again, the same tactic. This rook is defended only by the queen. Okay, so it's not goldfish. There we go. Queen's defending that, defending that. These are all the defensive relationships on the board. Look how many things the queen is defending. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, not necessarily the only defender of each one, but she is the only defender of this rook, and she is the only defender of this pawn. Okay, so overworked defender. Rook takes rook. The only way to recapture, queen takes rook. Queen takes f4 with check. My king is safe. It still has a rook patrolling the back rank. But anyway, that move comes with check anyway. The king is forced away from the pawn. Queen g5 check. King moves away again. Queen to f5 now. So just renewing my attentions to this pawn, trying to keep up the pressure. Another good move at some point might be king to f8, just adding a defender to this square. Okay, so for example, if the rook should double up, if my king didn't move, there's the threat of queen to e8 check. The only legal move would be rook takes, and then rook takes would be checkmate, back rank mate. But instead the king moves to e1. Now I move my king to f8. There's no rush to capture this pawn. It's vulnerable anyway. And at this point I'm only one pawn up. So now I grab the pawn. Free stuff. Now rook comes here. But this is maybe slightly too late, because the queen now can't come in there with check because rook takes. And if rook takes, king takes, and white's just lost a queen. So queen to h6 with check. Queen blocks. And now we're in a situation where I'm up 2 pawns. And should I exchange queens? Yes. Queen takes, rook takes, rook e8. Proposing a trade of rooks. King retreats, and we swap off rooks. So now all of white's pawns are here. So that's a nice team of pawns against 4 pawns. So we've got 5 on 4, and my pawns are fragmented and doubled here on the c-file. However, I have a pawn majority here on the king side. So pawn h5, and just get into the practice of imagining the square. So this king here must get into the square in order to have a chance of stopping this pawn, right? So king d2, g5, and now I'm just pushing my whole bank of pawns, wall of pawns, and nothing is going to stop promotion here. King can't capture this because then it would be outside of the square of that pawn. So the king has to retreat back into the square. I just move my king to one side, push my king, push my pawn. Now this king is stuck on the back rank. Grab a pawn, nothing that can be done. Captures en passant, captures, and now all the pawns come flying in. Check, h2, and there's nothing to stop this. Okay, and here white resigns. So just be very mindful of that, of the defensive relationships that you have. If you have one piece that is the only defender of multiple other pieces on the board, just watch out, because that piece can be deflected. Let's just review quickly. Okay, it's all normal play, right? And the game is decided by tactics, right? So here, first one, knight takes knight, leaves this guy defended only by a pawn, right? And here again, another error by white. This rook is defended only by the queen. This pawn also is only defended by the queen. So I can deflect the queen away from the defense of this guy. Queen recaptures, and I'm a pawn up. And now I'm 2 pawns up. Okay? So simple tactics. Just one more thing to add into your thought process there. Relatively straightforward win in the end, but enjoyable, and I hope instructive as well. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Chess Bootcamp if you haven't subscribed, and I'll see you soon.